Hello, welcome to Computer Tech and More. I'm your host Bill, and today we're going to talk about the Sabrent 5-bay USB 3.2 Gen 2 hard drive enclosure. This enclosure can hold 5 3.5-inch SATA drive bays, and unlike other enclosures, this is not a RAID enclosure. You can set up software RAID inside your operating system. However, I don't use it that way. I use it as 5 independent drives to back up my NAS. And I'm going to talk about it comparing to other RAID enclosures. My example is a Drobo, which I've had for quite some time. And talk about why I chose to buy one of these rather than also continuing to use Drobo. So I bought it off Amazon. And the link to it will be in the description below. But some of its features are, this is USB 3.2 Gen 2, so it's 10 gigabytes per second, which I think is a huge plus. It means that even modern, fast hard drives that can get close to 200 megabyte per second read and writes won't be limited or limited very much by the USB controller inside the device. Because if you do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you can see that, so that's 200, 200, 200, 200, 200, so that's 205 times, you get to 10 gigabytes per second. So older hard drives will not be limited at all. And I'll go over some of my testing in a little bit. So this does have a fan in the back to help keep air moving through it and keep temperatures under control. And because each hard drive has its own power switch, so it also has a main power switch in the back, and you can use it as a USB pass-through. One of them goes to the computer. So you turn it on, and that just activates the system. And then you can turn on each hard drive individually, and it'll power on just that slot. So your power draw will only be whatever you need it to be. So each one, I think, was running around 10 watts, which is really, really nice. And so on to my testing. So I ran a whole suite of tests because I was really wanting to test out its 10 gigabyte per second USB 3 Gen 2 capabilities. Sorry for that little wiggle. So first I started off with shoving an SSD in there. So, and when I say shove, I do mean that. This enclosure really is designed, I'm going to go back to the product page, for SATA drives. So it has a door and a little lever on it, and it pushes the hard drive in. With SATA, I had to reach in there, or SATA, I mean SSD, I had to reach in there and plug it in manually. Not the easiest thing in the world. And this is the final testing, but I discovered one thing interesting while I'm thinking about it, and that's I needed to turn on each one individually and press, hold, wait around 10 seconds before powering on the next one. Otherwise, I got very limited performance out of the SSDs. I didn't test that with the hard drives because I'd already found it out, but the write speeds were dropping to like 30 megabytes per second rather than in the 400s. So first, one SSD. So these SSDs are SATA 3, which means they max out at 600 megabytes per second. So a Gen 1 USB would be limited to 500. So by the very nature, the fact that I'm getting more than 500 megabytes per second on the read means that it's already Gen 2. So the next question becomes, how capable is the Gen 2? So then I ran 2 SSDs. I have graphs below, and I lost a little bit of performance, you can see, compared to the top, but overall very similar. Then I ran 3 SSDs, which is all that I have in my house, and there was a significant performance drop. So this is 1 SSD, that's 2 SSDs, and 3 SSDs, read and write. Read red, write blue. So this performance is from Crystal DiskMark utility, where I ran my own custom profile, kind of based off the normal profile, but I input it manually, and the way it ran is listed right above it. So you can see that with 1 and then 2, the reads are nearly identical, but you start to lose write. And then with 3 running, you lose more performance. And then random is always a reduction in performance, but there was less performance difference with the random. So after I ran all the SSDs, I ran hard drives. I limited my testing a lot more here and only ran it in 2 scenarios, once with 1 hard drive and once with all 5 hard drives. Now I discovered something interesting about Crystal DiskMark, where if you ran all 5 hard drives at once, it really didn't like it, and Crystal DiskMark would only run 3 hard drives at a time. So the performance numbers there need to be taken with a little bit of grain of salt, because it only ran 3 at once. But I did run a data transfer test for both the SATA SSDs and the SATA hard drives. But first, the graphs. So the hard drives I used were on the older side, 4 terabyte, greens, red, and a Seagate NAS hard drive. And they don't top out at particularly high performance, so I wasn't concerned about maxing out the 10 gigabytes per second. But you can sort of see that you lose a little bit of performance, but overall I would say that you don't lose anything by going to by adding all the hard drives and using them all simultaneously. And then this is my data write test. I have I think 8 gigabyte file that I just transferred from the computer's internal SSD to these hard drives. And that's 1 SSD. That's 2 SSDs, each SSD, and then 3 SSDs. So you can see the write performance degrade a little bit over time. So that the final, with 3 hard drives being written to at the same time, or right around 225 megabytes per second from 1 SSD at 333 megabytes per second. And hard drives lost essentially no performance. There was there's a little bit, but 1 hard drive data transfer was at 148 megabytes per second, and that degraded to, on average, around 130 megabytes per second. And I have my comparison. So that's all the hard drives running at once. This is in Windows, so all of them in green means that they're all running simultaneously. And then when I turned off the transfer to all but 1, it had that jump up in performance. And then I have my Crystal DiskMark runs. That one was in the process of running. And I took pictures to demonstrate that I was indeed running them all simultaneously. And then the data transfer tests, 2 at once, and then all 3. So what does all this mean? How would I use this device, and how does it compare to using a RAID type enclosure? So RAID has the advantage of a disk redundancy. So in this Drobo example, 5 bays, 1 bay is completely used for a redundant hard drive. So you effectively lose whatever storage you had in that hard drive, so that in the event that any one of the other ones were to go bad, you don't lose any data. While in the Sabrent 5 bay, if the hard drive goes bad, whatever is on that hard drive is gone. So I would not use this as a only backup solution. I would use it as a supplemental backup solution. That means you have a NAS, you have it in a RAID format of your choosing, and then you'd use this to back up that RAID. Or you need a massive amount of storage for scratch, for working on projects, that sort of thing, for temporary storage. This would make a great solution for that. When I went shopping for this, I came across inexpensive RAID boxes that were very similar to this, where it had a little RAID switch on the back, and you'd flip the switch for whatever RAID format you wanted. They cost about the same as this, and that would be also a good alternative because you can use it as individual drives or in a RAID. But I chose this one. I didn't need the RAID because I have another Drobo that I'm using for my second backup. And how does this compare to like the expensive Drobo? Well, the hard drives appear to be faster, or the individual transfer speed between this and the Drobo is very similar. The Drobo is limited to 5 gigabytes per second, but again, like I was establishing, the hard drive performance in the side of 5 bay Sabrent was not a limiting factor. So basically the data transfer speeds were the same between the two when backing up from my home NAS, even transferring data to and from the computer. So it kind of depends on what you need it for. If what you need is a RAID solution to back up your important data, this is not the solution for you. If what you need is to back up your backup or your primary, this makes a lot of sense to me. With regard to cost, I forget what I paid for it, but its listed price on their website page is $350. And that's pretty expensive. The Drobo was $500 new, and RAID boxes that I mentioned similar were about the same price. So about the same price and you get RAID, or same price and you get no RAID. That may seem like a simple solution for some, but again, like I said, I wasn't really interested in a quote dumb RAID. I say dumb RAID because you would need every hard drive to be identical, and that was the advantage with Drobo. So where was I going with this? So using this as a backup to back up your primary, so you can have each individual hard drive and you can split up your data, or even have some data on each hard drive, so it effectively creates your own manual RAID. That is a pretty enticing solution, or at least I think it is. And I'm very happy with how it performs. It's very quiet. It doesn't draw a lot of power unless you need it to. But again, with powering on advice, power on each switch, wait a couple seconds before powering on the next one, or you may end up with reduced performance for whatever reason. And I think that's all I have to say about the Sabrent 5 bay. I hope you enjoy this video, and I wanted to share my thoughts about it. Have a great day.